In the US, good afternoon in Europe, and good evening in India. I'm Sunita Viswanath. I'm with a US-based human rights organization, Hindus for Human Rights. Along with the co-hosts of this press conference, Amnesty International USA and Indian American Muslim Council, I welcome and thank everyone that is gathered here today. This press conference commemorates International Human Rights Day 2020 by bringing attention to the unjust arrest of Faisal Khan, National Convener of Khudai Khidmatkar, Executive Committee member of Socialist Party India, and Advisory Board member of our own Hindus for Human Rights. The facts of this case are so simple and will be elaborated on in a bit by our speakers today, particularly Colin Gonsalves, who is Faisal Khan's legal counsel. Faisal Khan is a Muslim Gandhian peace activist. He was arrested because he did namaz, which means Muslim prayers, in the compound of a Hindu temple. The truth is that the priest invited him to pray right there in the temple, but 4 days after this occurred, the same priest filed a police complaint against Faisal Khan, and he was arrested on November 3rd, more than a month ago. We are all concerned not only about Faisal Khan and the thousands of other activists, scholars, journalists, and faith leaders who are languishing in Indian jails for no crime that they committed, but Hindus for Human Rights has a special voice in this advocacy because we are progressive and inclusive Hindus that live by the spirit of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means that all the universe is one family, that we are all one. This press conference calls for Faisal Khan to be released and all charges dropped. We will now hear from our other co-hosts. Let's first hear from Minhaj Khan from Indian American Muslim Council. Minhaj Bhai, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. This is Minhaj Khan here, and welcome you all to the press conference. I represent Indian American Muslim Council. We are the largest Indian American Muslim advocacy organization in the United States. The arrest of Faisal Khan by the Uttar Pradesh government is a vindictive act from the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, Yogi Adityanath, whose hatred for Muslims has long been well known. Even among the Hindu right-wing fascists belonging to the RSS Parivar, Adityanath is the most vile example. We have seen it by his action. His persecution of Muslims in Uttar Pradesh since he became the Chief Minister in 2007 has ranged from an escalation in the extrajudicial killings to unleashing the police to carry out brutal attacks on the protesters against the Citizenship Amendment Act a year ago. In December last year, in Uttar Pradesh, they killed as many as 20 Muslims in a single day. And then they blamed the Muslims for their own brutality by levying heavy financial penalties of millions of rupees on the poor Muslims, and they fabricated charges of destruction of public property. When he became the Chief Minister, the state of Uttar Pradesh decided not to prosecute Adityanath in a criminal case of 2007 in which he was the prime accused for inciting mass violence against the Muslims that had led to the killing of a man. Last year, 4 UN Special Rapporteur wrote an open letter asking for an investigation into the killing of the Muslims in Uttar Pradesh. Faisal Khan's arrest must be viewed in this context. Faisal did not break any law, nor did he cause any breach of public order by praying on the premise of a temple. Importantly, he had prior permission from the temple priest. Faisal is a renowned Indian interfaith activist who has dedicated his life to propagating communal harmony and building bridges between Hindus, Muslims, and the people of other faiths. That is precisely why he is a danger to the people like Adityanath, whose entire political career rests on the ideology of hate and violence against non-Hindus. There can be no doubt that judges will eventually rule in favor of Faisal Khan, and he will be fully exonerated and vindicated. But justice also demands that he spend another night in a prison cell on those bogus charges against him. Equally important to point out now is that the blasphemy law under which he has been accused are the law that India should outlaw. Just yesterday, the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom released its report on the scourge of the blasphemy law around the world, and India featured prominently in that list. Blasphemy laws do not belong to the 21st century, and India must reject them too. In a robust democracy, people like Faisal Khan are fettered, not imprisoned. He's the prisoner of conscience, and we demand his immediate freedom. With that, I want to hand it back to Sunita ji, please.
Thank you, Minhaj Bhai. I want to say what an honor it is and how strong we are to be working with IAMC and also Amnesty International USA. And I invite Govind Acharya.
Thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Govind Acharya. I'm the India Country Specialist for Amnesty International USA. So Faisal Khan's arrest is very indicative of a crackdown of dissent in India that has sped up markedly in the past year, but has been continuing for several years. He was arrested for praying at a Hindu temple. He should never have been arrested, and he should never have spent even one moment in jail. Yet he is in jail. And all I can ask is, what does the Indian government or the Uttar Pradesh government fear from a man whose life was spent seeking interfaith harmony? And Faisal Khan's arrest came just a bit before other extraordinary acts in Uttar Pradesh, the ordinance on against interfaith marriage. And already people have been arrested simply for wanting to be married to the person that they love. And I ask, what does the government fear about interfaith harmony that Faisal Khan represented? And his arrest is part of a series of others who have been arrested. And just in the past few weeks, we've learned about Stan Swamy, who is an 83-year-old activist who was arrested for his activism. In 2018, ironically, he formed an organization called the Persecuted Prisoner Solidarity Committee to seek the release of 3,000 innocent men and women languishing in jail after being branded Maoists. He spoke and wrote at length against their arbitrary arrest and called for speedy trials. But he is now himself languishing in jail, begging for a straw so that he could consume his meals. He eventually got that, but why did he have to do that? And what does the Indian government have to fear from an 83-year-old man who has been an activist all his life? Earlier this year, I think because there's been so many things happening in 2020, we forget. Earlier this year in Bengaluru, a teenager, Amulya Leona, was arrested and jailed for merely stating Pakistan Zindabad and trying to say also Hindustan Zindabad at a protest. She was jailed for weeks on charges of sedition. And what does the Indian government fear from a teenager shouting a slogan at a protest? What is wrong with what she said? And of course, we in Amnesty International got a taste of this as well. We don't like to talk about our own challenges, but on September 30th, we officially heard that Amnesty International India was forced to close because of a series of actions that were clearly aimed at hindering our work. Now, we got a lot of media attention worldwide. And all I can say about that is that our organization being forced to close and getting that media attention is really the part of the pattern. And we have to ask not just what the Indian government has to fear from Amnesty India being able to operate in India, but also all of these wonderful activists in India. What do they have to fear from that? But our work will not stop, and I'm sure your work will not stop. In fact, it really has emboldened Amnesty International to fight for justice in India. A man by the name of William Watkinson said in 1907 that it is better to light the candle than to curse the darkness. I think many of you have heard this. In fact, our symbol is a candle. But their organizations within India who are lighting that candle every day. And the organizations here, the Indian American Muslim Council and Hindus for Human Rights, and many others that are also seeking an end to this injustice in India, and shining that light and to demanding the freedom of Faisal Khan and others within India. Thank you.
Thank you, Govind. For the members of the press and the public who are with us, if you do have questions, if you are not a member of the press, I would request you to send your questions by email to info@hindusforhumanrights.org. If you are a member of the press, please identify yourself and put your question in the Q&A section, and we will definitely keep this within an hour because we're very respectful of your time, and we will try and answer them. And if we cannot, we will email answers to your questions. The next up is somebody who can give us the clearest legal picture of this case. And I invite Faisal Khan's legal counsel, Colin Gonsalves, who is a senior advocate of the Supreme Court of India and the founder of an important organization called the Human Rights Law Network. So Colinji, please tell us the legal aspects of the case and also whatever you can share about the strategy to get our colleague freed.
Right, Sunita, but I'll be very brief, but let me start by telling you, I love the title of your organization, Hindus for Human Rights. I just love that.
Thank
now,
you.
let me go very quickly through the 6 or 7 points that we want to make. Faisal Khan's case begins with a description of the work that he does. Illustrious work, very inspiring work, his background, the relief work, the awards that he has won. So that establishes the credibility of this man and makes it so improbable that he should do anything that would encourage, division between communities on the basis of religion. Second, the Yatra proceedings, all of which are documented, show a pattern of activity. It's not a single mandir case that you go in and suddenly create communal disharmony. It is mandir after mandir after mandir, speaking beautifully to the pujaris, him being received warmly by the pujaris, a very respectful engagement, creating communal harmony, all documented. Again, increasing the improbability of him doing anything which is against the law. Thirdly, the court says that there was no video or photographs showing him, reciting couplets and so on and so forth. The court had actually stopped us from doing that at the trial court level, but it was on record. The link was given. The judge doesn't bother to look at that link. And his conclusion is that we were not shown any photographs. And if you look at the video recording, which Anand was so kind to give me, the video recording is so spectacular. And the transcript is so clear that there is no crime involved at all. Fourth is, on the namaz point, our pleading is that he told the pujari, it's namaz time. I want to go outside the mandir and we'll do our namaz and come back for lunch. And the pujari says, not necessary. We have place at the back of the mandir. Please do it there. It will save you some time. Our pleading in this regard is not contradicted, which means that he was actually invited not to do it out, but do it at the back of the mandir. Fifth, the delay in the filing of the FIR. The incident is 29/10/20. The first information report, which is like a complaint, is registered 3 days later on 1/11/20. In many cases, and this is one such case, delay in the filing of a complaint, first information report, is fatal to the prosecution case because it shows that certain developments took place, certain conversations took place, certain people intervened. as a result of which a complaint which would normally be filed within 1 hour of the incident is filed 3 days later. A very important point. Then there's all this thing about him falsely appropriating the work of the Khudai Khidmatkar. That is neither here nor there. That he has 7 lakhs in the account of the trust and so on is not worth it, is not worth talking about it at all. This is a quintessential hate speech case. It's not a blasphemy case at all. It's a hate speech case. And we stand by the provisions of the IPC regarding hate speech. It's a positive thing for activists to catch communal people when they participate in hate speech. This is a clear-cut hate speech case. The evidence is totally in our favor. That this should happen shows the weakness of our legal system in Uttar Pradesh and the ability of political people linked to Yogi, of course, naturally, to influence or bring pressure to bear on the, of course, the complainant, the Pujari, but also to bring pressure on the judges. The photos are very clear. The recording is very clear. The couplets are very crystal clear. And I think we have a pretty good chance of getting Faisal out. But keep your fingers crossed. You never know nowadays with the judiciary. But the people who've got all the information together have done a spectacular job in giving us information for the court case. I think we may succeed. That's it.
Thank you, Colin, and thank you for your whole team of lawyers that are working on this case and so many other cases. It's really incredible that you're able to continue this brave work in spite of the dire circumstances. Thank you. And you know we are all with you. Next, I'm going to invite a veteran Indian social activist, an inspiration to me for my whole life. And of course, she is on the front lines, and she's speaking to us from the front lines of the farmers' protest. Please, Medha Patkar ji, please speak to us about Faisal Khan and what you are doing right now.
Okay, thank you, Sunita ji. It's a great pleasure and privilege to address this press conference on the Human Rights Day. And it's really unfortunate that we have to talk about Hindus for human rights and Muslims for human rights and workers for human rights and farmers for human rights, Dalits for human rights, and so on. But the situation in India today is indeed absolutely unfortunate, because in spite of the right to practice, profess, and propagation of religion that is granted by the Indian Constitution to every citizen in this country of ours, which is known to be a democratic, free country, a nation state, there is intolerable violation of human rights with respect to every aspect of our life, really. And in every sector, we find that. But here, the Faisal Khan, who has been a symbol of the interfaith practice, profession, and propagation, is now behind the bars. I know him for last more than 2 decades, and I know him as a strong young activist who is absolutely for non-violence, and that he wants to achieve through the interfaith practices. And that is why the name of his organization itself speaks a lot. His organization's name, Khudai Khidmatgar, means the servants of God. And that's what was used for giving service to the lockdown affected, to the flood affected, to the Amphan cyclone affected in West Bengal, so on and so forth. So from Jammu and Kashmir to Kanyakumari, in every division, in every nook and corner of the country, Faisal Khan has always reached out with his young cadre, who is absolutely committed to the non-violence and satyagraha. So the pledge for truth in Mahatma Ji's terms, he was following that way of preaching and he was preaching not any religion, but the communal harmony and peace. I know his role during Delhi violence was also to bring in peace and harmony, and he never kept quiet. He has been a man who would mobilize not just youths, but people from different faiths, different communities, different sections of population, the workers, slum dwellers, to the minorities. And that is how he was always referring to the script of the Tulsidas Ramacharitamanasa. And when you are the Hindus who are organizing this press conference, I must say that he was really a symbol of Hindu-Muslim unity. He had formed an Apna Ghar where he would invite and provide shelter to anyone who would need it for social activism. But he has never been for any religious or any kind of discrimination. And hence the false accusation for the namaz that he paid in the courtyard of a temple is absolutely nonsensible. This is against what is the evidence that is available with all of us. And that evidence shows that the Kana Pujari, the priest who has now filed an FIR, was really welcoming him and his colleagues, not just Chand Bhai, but also the Hindu colleagues with whom they had started the Chaurasi Yatra, Kos Yatra, which has been a Hindu tradition. And he really went from temple to temple, as Advocate Colin ji had said. And the Kana Pujari, in a way, compelled him to pay namaz in the courtyard and offered him not just lunch, but a space. And that space was an interfaith space. And hence, the false allegations are something like what has been happening with the other social activists in India today. There are many, including Gautam Navlakha, who has been a human rights activist. Anand Teltumde, an academician, who is a successor of Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, the forefather of our constitution, and also Father Stan Sami or Sudha Bharadwaj, all of whom were fighting the battles for the freedom and rights of the Adivasis, the indigenous communities. And they had not committed any violent act, and yet the pen drives were used and certain material was pushed into their computer. And then they are blamed for violence in an incident which Dalits celebrated as the celebration against casteism, remembering their contribution during the British Empire. And hence, I think the Faisal Khan is incarcerated only because he was not for communal violence, and he was effective in trying to bring in the communal harmony. Anyone who is challenging this establishment of communal, callous and corrupt people is behind the bars. And they call us anything with any false accusation, whether Maoist, Naxalites or anything else. The farmers are called to be Khalistani, but who is facing this attack on the judicial process through the intervention of the politicians like Yogi Adityanath, as Minhaj Khan ji has mentioned. He is also really bearing the brunt of the undemocratic governance and the unjust kind of process because of which he is not granted bail. So I know that I would vouch for Faisal Khan as someone who needs to be brought back into the society which is facing the vulgar kind of violence, including mob lynching and the attack on women as it happened in Hathras, UP, facing the cumulative inequity with casteist and gender-based discrimination. So Faisal Khan, we want him to be released, and thank you so much for creating an international pressure, because these are the humanitarian ideals and values which he has been propagating and we also stand for. And that's why release unconditionally Faisal Khan and then prove that India respects Article 25 and the Indian Constitution as a whole and cannot really keep such activists behind the bar when violence is in the air. So thank you so much to Amnesty International, American Indian Muslim organizations, and all of you who have organized this. We want this to be organized for the other prisoners who have been our colleagues and comrades, who have been for Gandhian ideology and Gandhian ideals as well, just as Faisal Khan is. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Medhaji. And we are absolutely united in a fight to release all political prisoners. Faisal Bhai happens to be on our advisory board and is very close. And you just brought to life the spirit of this amazing human being. And thank you for doing that. And Colin was just saying, I mean, I hope to have optimism. So let's hope that all of our advocacy has some impact. Next, I want to invite a very, very dear friend, I want to say, and such an inspiration as well. Anand Patwardhan is India's leading documentary maker, recently profiled in a really fabulous way in the New York Times, if anybody wants to go read that. He has, I mean, my own education about the situation in India has come largely from his films, whether it's Ram Ke Naam, decades ago, or the latest film, Vivek, which is 4 hours long, but I've sat through it twice, and you don't feel like 4 hours went by. It's a very grim watch, but I really recommend everybody to try and get hold of that film. Anandji has also made a 5-minute film about Faisal Khan, who is his friend, like he is to many of us. It's in English and Hindi, and we will put the link in the chat. I hope that Dwarka or Giri can do that. But Anandji, come and speak to us about our Free Faisal Khan efforts and your own knowledge of this incredible man who is behind bars.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. It's an honor and to be with such great company. Basically, I don't have a lot to add to what has been said. I wrote about Faisal's arrest already in the Indian Express and in Scroll. And I try to connect the Khudai Khidmatgars of today with the Khudai Khidmatgars of the past, the original Khudai Khidmatgars. And I hope Rajmohan ji will be on this webinar as well, because Rajmohan has written a brilliant book on Badshah Khan, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, who was the original founder of the Khudai Khidmatgars, who faced British slaughter of their people with absolute nonviolence. They were the bravest nonviolent fighters of our independence struggle. They actually stood, as they were shot down, others replaced them to be shot down. And this is a story, I mean, some of it you see in the Attenborough Gandhi film, but that was a fictionalized version. So you don't really necessarily know that it was the Khudai Khidmatgars that was being talked about. It was made in a more generic way, but the Khudai Khidmatgars were at the front line of this battle using nonviolent struggle against bullets. And I'm not saying that today Faisal Khan and his Khudai Khidmatgars are facing bullets, but they're facing the modern version of repression, where people are being arrested, put into jail for no reason that anybody can imagine, and very often just forgotten in jail, unless someone like Faisal gets the attention that he's getting now. And I'm hopeful that Faisal at least will be released with the court intervention. But I'm also worried about the others who are in jail, like Faisal. People like Umar Khalid, for instance. Umar Khalid is now entering, he will, on the 23rd of this month, it will be his 100th day in prison. Umar Khalid is again, I don't want to divert from Faisal's thing, but I think that you have already documented so well what has happened to Faisal. But someone like Umar has not reached the public attention that it needs to get his release. But the whole situation was created after the Citizenship Amendment Act went through, and there were nationwide protests against this Citizenship Amendment Act. And Umar was at the heading, one of the people who was part of that protest movement that you saw all over the country. And he has been victimized because he's a Muslim, just as Faisal has been victimized because he's a Muslim. There were Hindu Khudai Khidmatkars also in the parikrama, in the yatra that they did. But to my knowledge, no case has been made out against the Hindus who were there. The case has only been made out against the Muslim whom they caught. So they have, and this is a pattern. This is something that you see again and again in India today. The victimization of Muslims and the demonization of Muslims, no matter what they have said. Umar Khalid never talked about violence, never talked about, he spoke about using nonviolence to fight against the Citizenship Amendment Act, and all those protests, whether it was Shaheen Bagh or all over the country, were completely nonviolent. Yet, what the government of the day, today's government, did was instigate the Delhi riots and then find the people who were victims of the riots and made them into the villains of the peace. So that is what is happening all across the board in India. Medha Tai gave us examples of what is happening in the Bhima Koregaon matter, where people have been just branded as urban Naxalites. So they have a formula. I mean, if you're a Muslim terrorist. If you're a Hindu, you're an urban Naxalite. And this is how, and if you're a Dalit, then you're a pure Naxalite. You don't have to be urban or rural. But so this is the language that has been popularized through their fake news agencies, which are running the show today. It's very hard for us to have a counter to this media assault. We do our little bit, like a 5-minute film that gets seen by a few hundred or few thousand people on the internet, but they have all the media in their hand. They control that media because they control the people who own the media. And so what we're living through today is much worse than the emergency of 1975, where it was a declared emergency and we knew what we were up against. Today, this is an undeclared emergency done through a control over the moneyed people who run the country. The people who run this country are not even the people in parliament. They are the people who have the big money in our country, and they control every institution. And as you see in the elections, even if the BJP loses elections, they just turn it around by buying individuals and bringing them over to their side after the election. So many states have become BJP because they bought the candidates after the election and turned it around. I don't know if anywhere in the world this situation exists where you can lose. Imagine that Donald Trump had the money and he would just buy some of the Democrats and say, sorry, we've switched sides. And now the Republicans are back in power. So this has to be looked at in this way. And I do agree with Colin that we have an extremely strong case to free Faisal, but that doesn't give me absolute confidence because we're in a very peculiar situation now, an unprecedented one. So we can't completely be sure that having a strong case means that we will win. So the pressure that you are putting is absolutely important because the world is watching, and that's something that will keep the Indian state in some check.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And on that very note, there is a question for a few future speakers to try and answer as part of their comments. Romi Mahajan, who's a writer and a journalist, says, what is the most effective role for NRIs, that's all of us outside India, in helping release Faisal Khan and other prisoners of conscience? Of course, most NRIs, at least in Hindu NRIs, support the BJP. But for those of us who are progressive, secular, etc., what do we do? So please keep that question in mind as people speak. Now I have a question for Rajmohan Gandhi ji, who is with us. He didn't think he would be with us, and so we have a recorded message. Should we play the message, or would you like to speak, Rajmohan ji? You're on mute. Should we play the video?
Yeah.
Okay, let's play the video, guys. Thanks, Rajmohan ji, for being with us. We can't hear it.
Unmute. You need to unmute.
We can't hear the video, Giri.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm unmuting and sharing again.
Today is Human Rights Day. Today also marks 6 full weeks since Faisal Khan was arrested in New Delhi following unsubstantiated and patently absurd allegations. Faisal Khan has not been brought before any court or allowed bail. Sadly, he's only one of a great many who've been shut away by the Indian police with no opportunity to defend themselves. Faisal Khan is an exceptional human being. In 2011, he revived the Khudai Khidmatgars, or Servants of God, the voluntary association started 90 years ago by one of the greatest figures in the modern history of India and Pakistan, Badshah Khan. Like Mahatma Gandhi, Badshah Khan fought for India's freedom from colonial rule and for harmony between Hindus and Muslims. Day after day, Faisal Khan and his Khudai Khidmatgars have been doing 2 things. One, reaching out with food to India's displaced poor, and 2, working for harmony among Indians of all faiths. I urge the government of India and the government of Uttar Pradesh, UP, the state holding Faisal Khan in detention, to recognize 3 realities. 1, the prestige of India and its rulers is being damaged by the continuing detention of Faisal Khan, a dedicated humanitarian of goodwill and compassion. 2, also damaged by Faisal Khan's detention and the detention of others like him is the reputation of Hinduism in the US and elsewhere in the world. 3, around 200 million Muslims live in India. Making 200 million Indians feel uncertain about safety or equal rights in their country is not the recipe for a harmonious future. A word also to fellow Indians and fellow Hindus. Most Hindus would like their Muslim brothers and sisters to enjoy dignity and equality. I urge them to speak out and demand justice for Faisal Khan and for all who are being denied their rights.
Thank you. Thank you, Rajmohan ji. I didn't mention who Rajmohan Gandhi is. He is a biographer, a scholar, an advisory board I'm very proud to say, of Hindus for Human Rights, and somebody that's been such a mentor to our organization and all of us, and a dear friend and colleague of Faisal Khan. And Rajmohan ji speaks from his heart. And he's recently also written an op-ed about the unjust arrest of Faisal Khan. Rajmohan ji, since you're here, do you want to add a thought for everybody to hear, since you're here with us live?
Well, I just want to say that I heard the final portion of Anand Patwardhan's remarks, and I was, of course, very inspired and stirred to hear him. But the truth that he is describing is a painful truth, and we must take it to heart and find ways and means of arresting and reversing that reality.
Thank you. Thank you, Rajmohanji. We have now, the rest of the press conference has diaspora, international speakers, allies, faith leaders, and a political leader. And we are so grateful to all of you for standing with us who are Indians or of Indian origin. And the first of our international speakers that I'll invite is Mr. Shaffaq Mohammed. Shaffaq Bhai has been a member of the European Parliament since 2019, and we're really honored to have you with us. From the UK, Mr. Shaffaq Mohammed.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak, and it's an honor and privilege to be in the company of Rajmohan Sahab and others. I think it's really important that the issue of human rights, particularly on this day of all days, is at the forefront of our minds, because human rights is something that's central to us being humane. As Gandhi Sahab said, it's not just about being human, it's about being humane. I might have been paraphrasing Gandhi Sahab's quote, but that's really important as we go forward, looking at the broader issues. Clearly, look, human rights issues aren't just something unique to India. Right across the world, we see a lot of intolerant governments, right-wing governments. You guys in the US have experienced some of that for the last 4 years. We see it here in Europe, with the Hungarians in particular and the Polish. And what we've got to do, and what I've seen when I served in the Human Rights Subcommittee of the European Parliament, is we've got to shine a light. We've got to shine a light on what is happening in these countries. And I think it was one of our speakers, Govind, who said, well, what does the government fear from the likes of Faisal Khan? I'll tell you what, Govind, the governments are fearing. That what Faisal Khan is doing is what Gandhiji was trying to do 70 odd years ago, which is to bring harmony between communities. And what's very clear is that the current government doesn't want to see harmony between the faith communities, actually just wants to see a majoritarian rule. And as a result, it's demonizing the minorities. And you're right, you know, at the moment, we see issues at the moment in and around Delhi. And a lot of those farmers who are from the Punjab have been portrayed as what? Khalistanis. So this name calling, demonizing, is not unique to India. It's happened across the board. It's happened in the UK as well when we had Brexit. Unfortunately, my country is about to leave the European Union. But what can we do? We should carry on working together. We should reach out, cross faiths. So it's fantastic. It's obvious who I am from my surname. I'm a Muslim, but I want to work with Hindus for human rights, and I want to reach across the divide. So you guys are in America, I'm here in the United Kingdom, and the speakers from India. And we've got to say, you know what, yes, we have our unique differences in terms of religions, but actually we're human beings, and we want to be humane, and we want to speak out for people like Faisal Khan, who at the moment don't have a voice. And those people in authority and power, that's the thing they want the most, to say to people like Faisal Khan, nobody cares about you. As Kamala Harris said, nobody cares about you, nobody's interested in you. And our message today, with all of us coming together, is that we do care about Faisal Khan, but not only Faisal Khan, all those other human rights activists, those people that want to bring communities together in harmony. And I'm happy to share any platform and speak out, not just about issues in India, right across the world. There'll be issues in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan. And it's really important that we all come together and call that out. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. Let's keep on shining that light on the intolerance that's happening at the moment. And let's ensure that the likes of Faisal Khan are freed and are allowed to do their well-worthy work that's badly needed in India to bring those different faith communities together under one platform. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Shaffaq Bhai. Let us cling to each other and refuse to let them divide us. That's the spirit that's going to get us out of this dark moment. Next, we have a group of faith leaders who are really important to us in our struggles. The first is Rabbi Alissa Wise. Rabbi Alissa, happy Hanukkah, first of all. And let me tell you that Rabbi Alissa's organization, Jewish Voice for Peace, and newly JVP-Action, the political wing of this organization, are an inspiration to us in Hindus for Human Rights, because when they started their journey to raise the issue of Palestinian rights was, it would just get you canceled. If you were a politician talking about this issue, it would be political suicide. But today, decades after organizations like this one and their hard work, we can talk about Israel and Palestine, and this has become a progressive issue. And we hope that talking about Hindutva will become a progressive issue in the panoply of progressive issues that we all care about. So, Rabbi Alissa Wise, please tell us your thoughts today on Hanukkah and International Human Rights Day as we pray for the release of our brother Faisal Khan.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a delight to be here in your company, all of you. So it's no secret that the greatest threat to the forces of domination and control, in whatever form they take, is the threat posed by stretching arms of solidarity across faith, religion, race, gender, nationality, ethnicity, stretching arms of solidarity reaching for each other. In my work co-resisting Israeli government rule of Palestinian lives and land, I live into and practice this value and hold it close. Just a few years ago, when I was set to travel to Palestine, Israel with an interfaith network of Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, and Muslims, I was stopped from boarding the plane by direction of the Israeli government because of my activism for freedom for Palestinians. There's great power in interfaith solidarity. One of the tools they wield so readily in response to divide our solidarity is by propagating the idea that we must fear each other, that we must isolate and insulate. That is then what they do by force if they cannot bend our will. They jail and incarcerate powerful cries for political freedom. The priest at Nand Baba Temple and Faisal Khan were engaged in an ancient sacred practice of hospitality. Just like Abraham, my ancestor in the Torah. In the book of Breshit, in the book of Genesis, we have the story of Abraham, where upon encountering guests in his town, he offers them water to bathe their feet, to enter his tent. Woe to all who criminalize and fear such tender gestures, such core tenets of an ethical, free, just society. As we rally for Faisal Khan's freedom, we also celebrate and recommit to building these bonds of connection, of openness and hospitality as a vibrant form of resistance. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate so much you taking the time to be with us and speaking from your heart. And next, I'm going to invite somebody who I have been on the streets with, because I live in New York City, just like this person, and we're both committed to connecting our faith to social justice and human rights of all. This is Reverend Chloe Breyer. She is the Executive Director of the Interfaith Center of New York and the Associate Minister of St. Mary's Episcopal Church. And I want to say a personal thank you to Chloe for making sure that Hindus are represented in all the struggles for human rights in New York City. So Chloe, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sunita. And I join with the Interfaith Center of New York, joins with Hindus for Human Rights and every other international and national organization on this call and around the world in asking the government of India to release Faisal Khan and to respect human rights within its borders and around the world. As Sunita said, I am an Episcopal priest here in the Diocese of New York, and I direct the Interfaith Center, which works with hundreds of grassroots faith leaders across the city in this one of the most diverse cities on the planet. The struggle for religious freedom has been a big part of our agenda right here in the United States since 9/11, and especially since 2016 when Trump came into office and did so on the backs of so many Muslims who he unjustly villainized in his administration. This is a struggle that is very close to our heart here in New York. And as someone for whom religious freedom and human rights has been essential in the struggle for interfaith harmony, I just want to say that India has always been a model the way that your constitution, and I think it's the Article 25 that says all faiths or people are equally entitled to the freedom of conscience and the right to freely profess and propagate their religion, subject to public order, morality, and health. It is something that my college professor, Ashutosh Varshney, explained is really an innovation, and it suggests a kind of equidistance between that government is supposed to have between religions, in contrast to the United States, where we often have more of a kind of wall of separation. So this has really been a gift that came about early in our century that India offered the world. And it's just, here we are today asking that the Indian government live up to the promise embedded in its own founding documents in modern India. I just want to close by saying that we are here in one of the seasonally darkest times of the year, what Christians know as Advent, the season of Hanukkah and Diwali. Often so many of our great traditions hold up light at this time of the year when the sun sets so early and doesn't rise till late time. And I think this has been brought up already on our call, as someone mentioned how it is better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. And indeed, this is a time of overwhelming hope, even as we face deep and dark struggles across the globe. Thank you so much, Sunita, and all of you on the call. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chloe. Really appreciate not just that you're here with us today, but that you're with us every day. Thank you. Our next speaker is Ani Zonneveld. She is the founder and president of an organization called Muslims for Progressive Values. And again, this is an organization that's older than my Hindu organizations, and so serve as such an inspiration. And another organization called Sadhana, Coalition of Progressive Hindus, that I am a part of, partners quite regularly with Muslims for Progressive Values. We do many interfaith events together. And just recently, I found out that MPV gives every year an award, which is called the Badshah Khan Award. And this is one of the reasons, although there needs to be no reason really for Ani being with us today. So Ani, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sunita. Thank you, everyone, for speaking up here. As a human rights organization, one of the works that we really focus on is highlighting the many human rights defenders and peacemakers all over the world that struggle to get their voices heard, because as has been alluded many times in this conversation, that it is the ugliness that is mostly focused on. But I want to actually address the question from the media really quickly. I think as an ECOSOC status organization at the United Nations, one thing that we usually do is address human rights issues with the various special rapporteurs. And there is a Mr. Clement Niatolosi Vaul, who is the special rapporteur in the rights of freedom of peaceful assembly and of association. That is someone that we can collectively also raise the issue with. And the monthly roundtable with the United States US Ambassador Sam Brownback. There is one coming up. It's the International Roundtable for Freedom of Religion and Belief. So these are outlets that we can raise the case of Faisal to bring visibility and to hopefully release him and others that are also unjustly imprisoned. And oddly enough, I was in India, living in India during the emergency period during Indira Gandhi. And so I understand the angst of this unofficial emergency period that you're experiencing in India. And as Sunita had highlighted, it so happens that we actually have an annual human rights award called the Badshah Khan, and it is intentionally, the title is intentionally called that to address and to highlight the fact that not Muslims are also peacemakers. And oftentimes when we hear about Muslims, it's always about the awful deeds that they do, but there has been a tradition of peacemakers. And this is one way of us contributing to or countering that narrative about Muslims being also perpetrators of violence. And it just so happened that Faisal Khan was also practicing in that tradition. And so I'm happy to contribute to this press conference. And thank you, Sunita, for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Ani. Really, really wonderful to work with you. And I'm going to be speaking about Faisal Khan in Muslims for Progressive Values annual gala event tonight, actually. So we will keep the attention building on this and other cases of injustice. Our final speaker today is a Hindu speaker. Dr. Anantanand Rambachan is a Vedic scholar and a professor of religion. He is of Indian origin, but he's from Trinidad. And so it's just this diaspora that's so expansive. And when you have people like Professor Rambachan speaking for our faith, it is not just expansive, it's also inclusive and centered in love. And so Anandji, please, you have the final word. And the reason for that is we've been told throughout from the moment that Faisal Bhai was arrested, we've been told over and over again how important it is that Hindus speak up in solidarity with Faisal Bhai, because what happened to him happened in a Hindu temple, and the opponents of justice right now in India are people who purport to be of the Hindu faith. And so part of the job here that needs to happen is that Hindus speak out against Hindutva loudly and clearly. And there's nobody that's doing that quite the way that Anandji is doing. So Anandji, go ahead, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Sunita and honored colleagues. I am grateful to add my voice to your distinguished ones. As Sunita said, I speak today as a Hindu scholar and more importantly, as a practitioner, since I think that we are also witnessing a struggle about the very meaning of the Hindu tradition and what it means to be Hindu. It is a struggle between a compassionate and inclusive tradition that welcomes and celebrates diversity, and one that is increasingly becoming inhumane and divisive. For me, the arrest and imprisonment of Faisal Khan is a human and a religious tragedy. The tragedy is a human one because Faisal Khan, as so many of you have said eloquently, is a person with an undisputed history of commitment to service and to the building of bridges of mutual understanding and respect across religious divides. And he is in prison for his dedication to this work. Such work in nations like India, where religious tension and violence in the name of religion are on the rise, deserves wholehearted support and not punishment in prison. Our world needs more peace activists like Faisal Khan. It is undisputable that Faisal's pilgrimage to Vraj, a land sacred for its association with the life of Sri Krishna, was undertaken with the most noble of motives. Faisal's pilgrimage was motivated by the critical need to build trust between Hindus and Muslims and to help overcome mistrust, fear, and ignorance. He was welcomed with generous hospitality by the Hindu priest at the Nanda Baba Mandir, and their dialogue was pleasant and congenial. In the course of his conversation that I listened to, Faisal quoted a very powerful and important text from the Ramayana. In fact, it is a verse that he quoted also during an earlier visit to the ashram of Sri Morari Bapuji, one of the most eminent of contemporary Hindu teachers. It is clearly one of Faisal's favorite Hindu texts. This beautiful text is, and I'm quoting now, Rama hi keval premu pyara, levu jo jaan nihara. Rama hi keval premu pyara, jani leu jo jaan nihara. In translation, it is only love that Ram, God, loves. May those who wish to understand know this. I think it is this profound understanding of divine love, Ramu Pyara, of divine unity and our human obligation to express this love in all our relationships that explain Faisal Khan's pilgrimage and his visit to the Nanda Baba temple. It is also this understanding of divine inclusivity and hospitality that motivated the Hindu priest at the Nanda Baba temple to invite Faisal to pray within the compound of the temple and not as he wanted outside. It is this generous invitation the Hindu priest was drawing deeply from a most ancient Hindu insight about the oneness of God, underlying a rich diversity of names and forms. In fact, the Rig Veda is the earliest sacred text to announce this teaching in famous words, Ekam Sat Vipraha Bahuda Vadanti, the one being the wise speak of in many ways. God is one, Ekam Sat. Those who name and worship God differently are not addressing themselves to different gods, but to the one true being. The Hindu tradition does not allow for a different Jewish, Christian, Muslim, or Hindu God. People of other traditions are not strangers with alien, false, or rival deities, but fellow beings whose God is also our God. Human beings in the vision of the Hindu tradition constitute a single community, Vasudeva Kutumbakam, in which each one deserves to be treated with dignity and with justice. This profound teaching echoed through the centuries in the words of great spiritual luminaries of India, like Guru Nanak, Kabir Das, in more recent times, Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda. It is a line in one of Gandhiji's favorite songs, Ishwara Allah, Tero Naam, your names are Ishwara, and you are also Allah. It is this theological vision and hospitality to a religious diversity that made it possible for India to accommodate a wide diversity of religious beliefs and practices, and to truly offer shelter to persecuted minorities for centuries. It is this vision that inspired a Hindu priest at the Nanda Baba temple to open his arms and to invite a Muslim brother to pray to God in the compound of the Hindu temple. These are acts of great religious inclusivism that deserve to be celebrated and not to be punished. But today, this vision of inclusivism and hospitality is threatened by the rise of a version of Hindu nationalism which marginalizes minority religious traditions and brands their followers as alien and anti-national. It is a nationalism that sees diverse religions as fortresses to be defended and not as inviting wellsprings where human beings can meet in friendship and where they can share and learn from each other, as Faisal Bhai was doing at Nanda Baba temple. Blinded by ignorance, mistrust, and hate, it cannot celebrate and enjoy the bonds of interreligious friendship. It is a nationalism that is threatened by human beings offering prayer to the one God in each other's sacred place. It is a nationalism that imprisons a peacemaker like Faisal Khan. It is a religious nationalism that engenders fear, and especially the fear of lifting our voices in support of our sisters and brothers in other religious traditions who are treated unjustly. But our deepest commitment is not to a nation, it is to divine truth and to the values of non-injury, truth, and compassion that are the heart of the Hindu tradition. We must lift our voices on behalf of all victims of injustice. We must speak without fear for a Hindu tradition that is not narrowly identified with the toxic ideology of hate and nationalism, but which speaks with compassion for the well-being of all human beings. It is from this Hindu tradition the one that loves love above all else, that I join my voice with all of you today, calling for the dropping of all charges against Faisal Khan and his freedom from prison. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anandji. More than anybody else in the world, Anandji has empowered me and kept me strong on this journey into faith. And for me, Anandji has taught me that the ideal Hindu that I want to be is one for whom paradukha dukhi is central. And that means seeing, when you encounter anybody, seeing their joy, seeing their suffering as your own. That is the aspiration. And I thank you, Anandji, for infusing our work with that ideal. And we have gone a little, but before we don't want to go over, we want to respect everybody's time. But I know that my colleague Raju wants to say a word about the latest development in the State Department of the United States. Raju, do you want to take just a minute or less to speak?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm so honored to listen to all of you. And I want to thank my colleague Sunita to put so much passion into this. And we certainly commit ourselves to doing something similar to cover all the prisoners of conscience in the near future. And we are counting on all of you to show up and broaden the voice on behalf of all of them. I just wanted to take a moment to mention that just 2 days ago, the State Department decided not to put India on the list of countries of particular concern. It is to us, it was something that we hope the State Department would do to really send a message to the government of India that it cannot continue to massively violate human rights. It hasn't happened. But more importantly, this morning, what I'm missing most are the few Indian American lawmakers who are known to be progressive, who have made statements in the past about human rights violations in India. And I feel really sad that they were unable to join us today. And so many issues are, I am sure, in the forefront of their decision, but it's my hope that we will work in Washington, DC to convince more lawmakers, particularly of Indian American origin, to speak up. There is no excuse for them to be quiet at this point in time. So we need all of your help, those of you in the United States, to talk to your lawmakers that they must not forget what is happening in India. We don't want to wake up one day and find out why we did not do or say things when all signs were pointing to a worsening human rights situation. So please support Hindus for Human Rights in our advocacy effort. And you can do so by reaching out to your own lawmakers and ask them why they're not talking about India. Thank you.
Thank you, Raju. And thank you to everybody who spoke today. And we hope that these clear and impassioned voices for justice reach the government of India, the government of Uttar Pradesh, and the Allahabad High Court, where Faisal Khan's case will continue to be fought. We will email everybody who registered for this press conference the recording, as well as a detailed press release summarizing the statements made. And I pray that not only Faisal Khan, but every single person unjustly jailed in India will be freed. Thank you everyone for being here today. And we will no doubt continue to partner in the struggle ahead. Good evening in India. Enjoy the rest of the day. Human Rights Day in America and Europe.
Thank you so much, Sunita ji. Take care.
Thank you, Sunita.
Bye-bye.